You're listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, no, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today I'm here with Ava Rockwell. Ava is a founder and visionary of Rockwell School of Holistic Medicine, founded on a need for better educational standards and transparency in these career fields. She has an endless passion for all things holistic, and she speaks my language. I do too, and I love what you're doing. So thank you so much, Ava, for being here today.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Well, the first thing we always ask our guests to do, because I personally believe that our stories are super powerful, our journeys are very powerful, and the stories in those journeys, literally when we put them out in the world, create a beautiful ripple effect of hope. So do you want to share your story with us today?
I would love to.
Hey, I'm excited.
So I grew up in a very holistic minded environment. When I was very young, my dad would take me ginseng digging with him, sometimes known as ginseng hunting, which is funny because it's a plant. And so I knew how to identify it, at 5 years old. And I would find it with him, as he was backpacking me through the woods if I was tired or whatever. Or we were going through a place that had a lot of birds, he might backpack me. Otherwise, I walked with him and he was pointing out what was what. And as I got older, my aunts, they were like giving me supplements, and some of my friends, they'd never even like heard of a supplement, but I had to take my vitamins. And when I was like 11, one of my aunts gave me an aromatherapy kit, which was kind of life-changing for me because I was very poor and did not have a lot of stuff or toys, especially like almost like nothing. And so this was like my life, like my dad got me an old 1800s microscope from a yard sale or something, and I just lived and breathed all that scientific stuff. And as I got older, I just started, treating myself for like roundworm and other things like that just by like reading herbal books. And, it can be iffy. I use walnut hull, which also burns the skin, but you live and you learn. It killed the roundworm. But I had a little bit of a scar for a minute. And I think it eventually faded. But as I got older, like in my 20s, when I attended Indiana University, I approached my counselor and told him that I really wanted to study alternative medicine. And he's like, and I said, I've researched this. I said, I can have an independent major. And he's like, oh, well, nobody around here knows anything about that. So you're really going to be on your own. Are you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. He was like, you're going to have to put this whole thing together by yourself. And I was just too overwhelmed and intimidated. So I chose communication and culture. And then on the side, I started studying with a school that eventually closed. I want to say it was Clayton College of Natural Health. And then I never really did anything with it. I was kind of all over the place in my 20s. And then I had a daughter, and I had a home birth, and I breastfed and co-slept and conscious parented and all that kind of stuff. But she got older, and even when she was young, like I would give her echinacea, and she like never got sick. She was on antibiotics maybe once for a staph infection in her finger. And if I could go back, and I probably would have treated that differently than giving her any kind of topical or any kind of antibiotic if I, looking back. But antibiotics and bacterial infections are really dicey. So you really have to know what you're doing there, because time is of the essence. I just want to throw that out there as a disclaimer. You can't just always use a natural thing. I mean, it depends on the time, the severity. So there's my disclaimer on that. But as she got older, I noticed, especially going through puberty, she's never going to listen to this, so she won't have to be embarrassed by it because I feel bad. I'm like, oh, is she in the room? No. But she had a lot of, emotional changes as I think most mothers realize and know. But some people don't know that for a large portion of the population that gluten affects people psychologically, psychiatrically, not even just mental things like impatience and just blood sugar issues, irritability, but also schizophrenia is strongly, it used to be called bread disease. It's strongly connected to gluten in utero. studies show that women that consume gluten in utero have a wildly astronomical increased rate of having a child with schizophrenia, which is just, to me, really serious, you know? So she started having these issues, and I could not get to the bottom of it. And we pulled her off of gluten, completely changed her, but then she started eating a lot of processed rice products, so she was exhausted all the time and kind of started having autoimmune issues from that alone. And you're like, oh, well, rice is so innocent. Not heavily processed rice is really not ideal in excess, consumed excessively. So this all, excuse me, this all brought me back to my roots. And so I started looking online for another alternative program like I had roughly 20 years before, 10, 15, 20 years before. And I could not find anything that I felt would give me the confidence and the skill sets I needed to practice confidently. And I was really, really torn with this. And I was like, in the back of my head, I was like, well, you're just going to have to create a program that you want to do. I was like, no way, no, And if someone had pointed out to me though, and actually said, look at this timeline of work, and they showed me a crystal ball of what the future would look like, I definitely would have run, because there was so much time where I'm just at a computer, like I have put my time in, if you know what I mean, admin office wise. So that's kind of my story. My daughter brought me back to my roots on holistic medicine. That's how my journey began.
By the way, I love what you're doing. And I love that when you didn't have a road, you made one. Like, I love that about people, because sometimes that's where the greatest stuff comes from. No one's done it because it's either too hard, they don't get it, or there isn't a road, there's no path to it. And so people like you that come first and forge that path and open those roads up for everyone, and my hat's off to you. Thank you. I know that two of my daughters are, you grew up holistic, right? I did not. I grew up with doctors, and all they knew were pharmaceuticals, right? Give them a pill, give them a vaccine, right? Give, and nothing about supporting our immune systems, right? As supporting what our body is already doing and giving it that support it needs to stay in that place. So now two of my daughters are doctors of natural medicine with PhDs in holistic medicine. And I love it. And it was because they were in med school. And when I got sick, they couldn't help me. They're like, in med school, we only get a semester of nutrition. That's it. And they realize that what we put in the bodies, just like you talking about eating gluten and how it's affecting in vitro, how it affects your child's growth and neurological system, is powerful stuff. And people don't realize that. And so I love that you're doing this. Tell us a little bit about your Rockwell School of Holistic Medicine and why you founded that.
Yeah, so all the programs that I was looking at online, first of all, there were only so first of all, there are, to be honest, probably hundreds of herbal schools. And as far as I'm concerned, they all have something to offer. Incredible, but to be honest, also, generally the herbalists stick with the herbalists. And for the naturopaths, they kind of have their hands in everything. And when I say naturopath, I mean a traditional naturopath. They just look at any modality. They're just like, yes, 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 yes. But the herbalists are more focused. But I wanted a school, you see a lot of division with the two groups, nobody ever talks about this stuff, but the herbalists don't generally love the naturopaths because they think the naturopaths are kind of wacky and going off on tangents and just too open. And the herbalists are like, well, they don't even know that much about herbs either. So I wanted a place where everyone could really, really learn everything, including spiritual medicine, because there is a spiritual side to medicine in certain situations and depending on your core beliefs and everything, because some people are just like, no way, that's not for me. But when you have exhausted every possibility, and sometimes even as a starting point, even in terms of psychology and your relationships in your life, to me, that's spiritual versus like something really concrete and medicinal. I was looking at these programs and they're like literally, the school's been around for 20 years and they're literally using a nutrition book from, no kidding, 1982, right? And I'm like, what? How, because that stuff changes like constantly, and these schools were like publishing their own books and making kind of, in my opinion, double money in a biased way. And I really felt you need non-bias, and I wanted to just provide information so people can make informed decisions. And I just was like, I have to create this school. So we have 3 programs, 4 actually. spiritual medicine and esoteric arts is kind of our black sheep. Not everybody likes that, but some people love it and are obsessed with it. And then our core programs are clinical herbalism, traditional naturopathy, and advanced holistic nutrition. And so that way I feel we have the four pillars of kind of the cornerstone of all medicine, in my opinion. And we do recognize and respect conventional medicine for acute emergency care and for what it does offer, because it is beneficial in many ways. But, you know, it's like salt, you know, don't want too much of it, because it is the third leading cause of death in the United States, medical errors, you know.
Right.
But it's so massive, almost how could it not be? But there is some obvious reform necessary.
One of the things we always talk about, because we have a lot of people who are into the holistic lifestyle, but we always want to tell you that it works really beautifully when you work with modern medicine, right? With Western medicine. So as you very clearly said before, for infections and things like that, it is really about timing. Like if you have a staph infection, I'm not going to tell you to rub an herb on it and not go see a doctor, because once that horse gets out of the corral, it's very hard to get it back in. So I think holistic medicine is more for the preventative side than the treatment side when you've let something get super bad, because although it possibly could work, it doesn't work as fast, right? I feel like it doesn't. If I put herbs on an infection, it's going to take me longer for my body to start responding to that and creating what it needs, rather than a strong antibiotic to fight something I've let get out of control. So I love that you shared that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's a really dangerous thing because, you know, to be honest with you, my daughter is very, very stubborn, like hyper stubborn. And she got a infection, a urinary tract infection, and she wanted to treat it naturally. And of course, I am horrified because she's already having symptoms at this point. And I'm just like, to be honest, I mean, people might be shocked, but I'm like freaked out, you know, like she needs, in my opinion, an antibiotic immediately. She tries to delay it, right? And she ends up getting very, very sick, ends up getting sepsis. People do not know how serious and critical this stuff is. On the other hand, for example, I have read stories of women treating what's called trichinosis. It's some kind of like a vaginal bacterium with just pomegranate juice, drinking it, literally. I mean, you can also do an internal whatever, but you know, douche or whatever, but like just by drinking it kills that, you know, like for some women. And that's in studies. Like I'm not even making that up anecdotally. That is literally in a scientific study, which is to me mind-blowing. But then if you pick the wrong thing, that's the thing, is you really have to know what you're doing. You can't just be kind of like self-diagnosing and stuff like that, like you said with the staph infection. Like if you know what it is right away, but I didn't know what it was. It was just a little spot on her finger that hurt that you could barely see. But it hurt really, really bad. In terms of you're totally right. Conventional medicine is terrible at treating like long-term chronic disease unless it's like severe acute care, like diabetic amputations and emergency ER stuff, and surgeries like that. Like it's good for that kind of stuff. But when it comes to other stuff, holistic medicine, it's obviously more preventative. But some things that people don't know is that, you know, there are these things called phage banks where they treat tons of actual infections like urinary tract, like ear infections in children to avoid antibiotic use. And all they are they're little viruses that eat the bacteria and then they just flush out of your system with no side effects. So I would love to see these in health hospitals here, because we're seeing a rise in antibiotic resistant infections of all kinds. There's all kinds. We have an entire horror section of it in our program to frighten the wits out of anybody. And you know, oxygen chambers are also preventing diabetic amputations. They're like bacterial infections that are actually killing people. Like you go to the beach and you get an infection and then you die 2 days later. Like this happened 2 summers ago constantly down here in Florida and kind of all over the country. There was a case in LA. The founder of the mission in downtown Los Angeles, he was double amputated from bacterial resistant infection. So this stuff is really serious. So you're kind of like, well, is holistic medicine really just for preventative care? No, it's also for acute care. And that doesn't even touch into medical ozone, how you can get it in your knees and joints and prevent surgeries and regenerate your joints and tissues. So that's pretty, to me, emergency. I don't want a freaking hip surgery or a knee surgery if I can avoid it.
One of the things that I did in my healing process that I look back on now, and I probably wouldn't do it again, even though I knew it had a good outcome, but I had to have a double mastectomy. And 3 months later, I get this little red sore on the side of my breast where the implant had been put in. And it kept irritating me. I thought it was my bra, and it turned out it was a staph infection. And it spread very rapidly. And I had to go in and have the implant removed and go through terrible antibiotics because I'm allergic to everything. Like Bactrim is one of the worst antibiotics for your system. And it was making me sick. I get through it. Months later, I have reconstructive surgery. 3 months down the line, I get a red spot in the same spot. And it's happening again 3 months after healing. And when I went to the doctors, thank goodness my doctor was on maternity leave and it was a step-in surgeon. And I literally told him no. Like, they're scheduling for surgery. I'm like, no, I'm going home and I'm going to work on this holistically. Don't ever do that. But it worked out well for me. But I drew a red line around it. My husband's a doctor. He's a veterinarian, but he knows enough to get me to a hospital if it turns bad. We drew a red line around it. I looked up everything I could use. I used a lot of essential oils. I started flushing my body out with like green juices, things like that. It took a little while, but if it got past this red mark I had agreed, I would go into the hospital and we would remove the implant. Thank goodness it was a good outcome. But I literally told my doctor, what are you going to do? Come to my house and repo it? I'm going home. I'm going to work on it myself. I do not want to go through that again. And I was able to save my breast and do this, but I do not suggest you do that. Like, that was a dumb move on my part. I should have agreed to antibiotics, given a time frame where the doctors were monitoring me and said, give me a week to try to work on this and I'll make sure it doesn't, get worse. If it gets worse, I'll be right in. But it worked for me using that instead of using antibiotics. So I know that it's possible. Is it a smart thing that I did? Not so much. But one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about is your spiritual side. I'm a mindset coach, and I understand the power of spiritually connecting with your healing process. And if you're not there, it doesn't matter how magical the concoction or herbs or program they put you on. If you're not going to receive it, and your mind is like, it won't work for me, it probably won't, right? You have to have that spiritual side tapped into and be willing to receive it. Am I right?
I completely agree 1,000% with you.
I agree too, because when I was sick and given a death notice, I remember thinking, if I looked online, literally not knowing anything about holistic 10 years ago, and if I was seeing someone selling their fresh chicken poo and I needed to rub that on my face, I was so ready to receive healing. I would have done it and I would have been like, this is going to fix it. This is my answer. So you have to be in that spiritual frame of mind to receive the gifts that are coming your way and see that healing happening for it to actually take place. You've got to be part of the process.
I agree completely. And, some people are, I would say, down with, just looking at it, just even using the term spiritual, you know what I mean? If it doesn't come to them in a direct Judeo-Christianic way or, Islamic, the three major religions, if it doesn't come to them in that fitted box, then they're just like, no way, even if it kills me, I wouldn't do it because then it's blasphemous or something. I do see those religious fears sometimes where, to me, like you said, whatever it is, I'll do it. But I really admire, you're telling other people, in my opinion, probably like a medical disclaimer, and just to really be safe, because not everybody is on the same level. But if you are really listening to your intuition, which is what you were doing, and you did self-heal because you listened to your intuition. So I would really encourage people to really listen to their intuition and to seek help, seek second opinions. Suzanne Summers was told that she had lung cancer and they wanted to operate on her that day or do something major. It's in her book. I mean, I read it probably, the paragraph twice because it's so astonishing. And she got a second opinion and they were totally wrong. But, I know people, they are like, oh, well, I shouldn't have done whatever, well, your story is important and you may help somebody else, in the future. But at the same time, many, many young women are having the double mastectomy, at all ages,
I agree.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, and the staph infection recurring, that is another thing that people do not know, is that antibiotic resistant infections will reoccur after healing. Many times people don't really know much about it. Would you agree?
Oh, I didn't know anything about it, and I come from a medical background. I knew nothing. And why did it keep coming? It's not in a place that gets dirty, right? It was all completely healed. And it starts out like, I honestly thought my bra was hitting something and, leaving a red mark or
Yeah.
irritating it, until it like rapidly started growing and becoming painful.
And a lot of, you can actually, some people theorize that, if you're almost like too clean, like, bacteria can really just, it's not anything even about being dirty. Sometimes it's like just
Right.
the opposite. There's just not, always using the antibacterials. Like you want to use the kinds that don't have the chemicals, which have now been banned, but that used to be actually an issue. There are a lot of chemicals in hand sanitizers, just.
What I'm really grateful for is modern medicine is literally taking a second look at holistic medicine and starting to say, why not? And I know that I have a ton of drug allergies, so I'm allergic to almost all antibiotics, so it's super hard to find something to use. I'm allergic to narcotics. So every time I have a surgery, I cannot use pain medication. And I found holistic stuff to help with my pain, and meditation and focus, and like letting that pain go. And it actually works for me, which if you knew me, you'd be like, I would never believe that. But it does work for me. And so I tell people, like, there are other options. And now when my doctors, when I have a surgery, which is often, they'll see me creating this little concoction of essential oils, and I put them in a little veggie cap, and I swallow it right after surgery, which is a no-no in hospitals. Like, you are not allowed to ingest anything they do not control, because you're under their care. And after years, this has been 9 years now, they're like, just let her do it. We know what she's taking. It's completely holistic and it works for her. And we got to give her something. And so they let us fix those right after post-op. So they are definitely opening the doors and saying, like, look, we don't have anything that'll work, so let's let her try this. And they're getting on board with it.
Yeah, it's few and far between, but thank goodness. I mean, even if so, translational medicine is basically how long does it take for, a doctor who's already graduated and still practicing to catch up on new medicine, or for the general public to get a grasp on it too. It's like 20 years, it's going to be another 20 years for people to realize, like, what really actually causes heart disease, inflammation, and those things tied to that, like vegetable oils and sugar, is that main aggravator. It's so exciting to find out, like, the truth, and it's so exciting to see, like you said, they're kind of like, why not? We can't fix everything. And you see these water birthing centers and, holistic stuff like that. It's great. I just really would love to see at least one or two phage banks in every city for those people that don't want or cannot take antibiotics, because it's all natural, no side effects, except it flushes out. And to me, I'm like, okay, this is like hundreds of years old, of information. That these phage banks have been around for like 100, 200 years in Eastern Europe. You know what I mean?
I will just tell you, one of the antibiotics that they were trying to give me when I got the first infection was Bactrim. And it literally, you could see the red vein turning red, and it was burning my veins. So their solution for this was, let's put a PICC line in so it doesn't have to go through her vein. It just goes directly through her heart into her bloodstream. I was like, hell no, I'm not putting something in my heart that my vein can't even tolerate. And so, like, I had to put the nix on that to find something else. So I ended up being fine in both times. But you're right, it does come back, and I kept watching for it to come back the third time, and it never did, thank goodness. But it does, that little infection stays in your tissue, and it has memory, and it might raise its ugly little head at some point.
I don't think we quite know everything about these unseen effectors of the human space, But I'm curious what you were using for your pain relief. Did you have frankincense in it?
I do. Frankincense, I use frankincense, marjoram, and I put a little bit of peppermint and copaiba oil in a gel cap, and I swallow it. I call it my morphine bomb, because I have no stomach, so I can't take aspirin, I can't take Tylenol, I can't take anything. But if I take this, it absorbs super quickly, and I just get that. Again, I know a lot of it's mindset, because I know I need relief from this because I have no other options. And so I'm receiving it. As the minute I'm swallowing it, I'm receiving that relief.
So frankincense is proven in countless study after study after study after study after study to reduce inflammation and pain. And for me, I can use it topically and internally. Like, I practically drink that stuff, but I started out testing it and learning it because I had severe dysmenorrhea, menstrual cramps, which, the root of that's a lot of grains, corn, rice in the diet a few days before the menses begin. And if someone does kind of a zero carb paleo diet, just like about 4 days before their period starts, that reduces the inflammation to the point where people that could not walk before like me, and my legs would go numb on menstrual cramps unless I had either tons and tons of ibuprofen or tons and tons of frankincense. Those cramps are essentially gone. But if you had to have your Cheetos the night before and your, gluten-free mac and cheese, like I know how it is. So you're going to be really, really inflamed. That just like kicks in those cramps so much worse. And the topical and internal frankincense work for me, but most people don't, they really wouldn't know where to begin with that. But me and you have experienced it. And you know what I find increases absorption? I don't know if you've already discovered this yourself, because I've tried it a lot, and I've done it straight, and I've done it with a carrier oil like avocado oil. And you would think because the ratio would decrease with the carrier oil, the concentration of the frankincense, but I think it's a delivery method. It delivers it better. So I find with a little bit of a carrier oil, my pain goes away faster for longer.
And it does. And I use I use coconut oil, but I do use olive oil if I don't have coconut oil. But it does, because what happens when you use an essential oil is it's kind of like an alcohol, right? It evaporates the minute you rub it on.
Right.
But if you put it in the oil, you get more of it, and it like delivers to the body much quicker. And for people who don't believe that, put peppermint on your foot, right? And see how long it takes you till you taste it in your mouth. It's not very long. It's because it's already releasing in your bloodstream, so you can taste it.
You got a chemical dose of it.
Yes. So same with frankincense. I mean, I immediately when I use it, I get that frankincense taste in my mouth, and I didn't ingest. I just put it on my skin. Yes. So it works.
I don't mind that. It's very clarifying, refreshing.
I like it.
I find after a dose or two of it, or sometimes I'll do like a 4-day dose. It's been a minute because I don't have the severe cramps I used to, because I've changed a lot of things with my lifestyle and diet. But I find that it just works incredible. But like you said, you do taste it. But my skin almost glows after it, because it like wipes the slate clean with inflammation.
I love that. Before I have to let you go, let's give the women that are listening and the men, because you should be taking good care of yourself too, like 3 little tips, because if you don't understand what inflammation is about, I promise you, I can draw almost a straight line to any ailment you have from inflammation. Reducing inflammation in your body is key, like to getting rid of so many things. And there are some triggers for that, right, that you may not even be aware of. So let's tell them 3 things they can do to start reducing inflammation in a really holistic way.
Okay, so for myself, the main thing is, honestly, nobody wants to hear this. It's just a fad. They think they're hoping it's going away, but gluten causes so much inflammation, and to the point where, like, if you don't do gluten for like 4 days, you might lose 4+ pounds in excess water weight, because for every ounce of carbohydrate you consume, you retain 2 ounces of water, generally speaking, until it phases out of your body. But people that are on a steady diet of gluten, you can almost see it in their face. But if you pull it off of your diet and re-add it, you will start learning what inflammation actually feels like, because there's a feeling to it. And it's kind of like the marshmallow man, the Michelin marshmallow man. You feel like, even though you might look like your normal weight, you feel heavier. You feel like your cells are bigger, and your face, you just don't feel or look your best. And you'll notice it if you keep pulling it out and adding it. You'll start to learn what inflammation feels like. So I would say removing gluten. And let's see, do you want to throw in one?
Well, I would say sugar.
That was my next one, sugar, yes.
For sure. I would totally stop using sugar. And by the way, when I first started giving up sugar, I got a scanner. So when I went to the grocery store, I could scan the product code and it would tell me if sugar was in there. There was sugar in ground beef. They put sugar in your beef, ground turkey, anything that they process, they add sugar to that you're not aware of. And it's under a certain amount, so they don't have to record it.
I've heard that.
It was very hard for me to find things that I could eat that didn't have sugar. They couldn't be touched, literally. I had to get fresh fruits. That's why I think a paleo diet is so good, or a plant-based diet is so good for you, because it's not touched, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an autoimmune paleo diet really, really can help reverse and mute autoimmune systems or pre-autoimmune symptoms. But the last thing that I would say is really inflammatory in a different kind of way, like in that spiritual way, is our toxic relationships. And, they will really, if you're always tired and you're not really sure why, and maybe you're eating bad, but you're not eating like that bad. And, you're walking every now and then, but you're exhausted constantly and you just have no energy. Look in your relationships. I think a major factor of like disease and ailment and inability to lose weight. But like you said, I was doing an interview yesterday and I was like, people are like inflammation. Like, what is that? Like, who cares? Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. And literally before I really understood inflammation, I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Stop talking to me about gluten and stop talking to me about inflammation. Even though I'm like really holistic, I'm like, it was all invisible. I didn't get it. But then after you start really, really understanding about like the sugar and the vegetable oils, they cause so much inflammation in the body. They cause it to overproduce cholesterol and fix where your arteries are raw from inflammation. That's where the heart disease comes from. Your body's trying to repair itself, so it overproduces cholesterol to line those inflamed arteries. So it's not actually the steak,
I agree. One of the things that my daughter does in her practice is when people, because she's all about food base. And when people come in and they're like, yeah, it can't be that big a deal, right? And I'm not eating that much of it. Well, for some people, not that much is too much. And so she has you keep a diary for a week on how you feel after you eat everything. And you will see the difference. And when you're eating non-processed foods that are gluten-free, and when you have a gluten-free meal, how your body reacts just within hours afterwards, right? You feel like my fingers get super swollen. I can just feel it. Like you said, the Michelin Man, I feel it first in my fingers, like, oh, they're getting stiff. What's going on? I could feel it there. So it definitely is true that if you start removing that, or you just keep a little journal on what it feels like after you eat something. Does it make me sleepy? Is it giving me energy? What is it that I feel after I eat this? Your body is literally telling you what's good for you and what's not.
Yes, and I can drop like 4 to 6 pounds after like an 8-day binge. I'm a binge eater, but I don't do it constantly. And a lot of the times I eat super, super clean. And, that's kind of what saves me. But I do hope to get to that point where I never like eat certain things again or whatever. And I've gone like 6 months on a sabbatical, but I think, they were saying whenever you do stuff like that, tell yourself, well, it's not forever. And then it was like, once the 6 months was over, then it was like never again. But yeah, you can drop like 4 to 6 pounds just like one day of not eating refined sugar. Like for example, I will eat like a whole pound of salmon to myself. That's like 2 big steak fillets of salmon, or a half a pound of trout, which trout is really big, so it takes up as much space as the salmon, and 1 or 2 pounds of asparagus, and with butter and lemon and capers. That to me, like that's a lot of food, and maybe other stuff too. But there's no refined sugar, there's no gluten, there's no grains. Of course, there's no soy. I mean, I shouldn't have to say that one, but unless it's like miso soup, there's some allowables. Occasionally soy sauce. Or you can also get gluten-free soy sauce. But I dropped 4 to 6 pounds in just one day of unrefined sugar, unprocessed carbohydrates. Do you know what I mean? People don't realize. It's like, just give it a try, because even if you can't commit to it for life, 4 days every other day, any 1 day a week is improvement.
Well, Ava, you have been a pleasure. I love your energy. I'm going to put in the show notes where everyone can connect with you. And I think you're amazing. So I hope you guys connect with Ava and learn more about her school, what she teaches, and how you can connect and follow her and learn. Do you have like a newsletter or anything that people can get?
They can visit our website and sign up for our newsletter. We are actually updating our website, and it should be, you can still do the newsletter now, but it's going to be a little bit better in a few days. But the website is School of Holistic Medicine and that.com. And that is also our Instagram handle. And Maggie will send you guys a code that will give you 10% off of all of our programs, but our Rockwell Tri-Doctorate combines all of our programs. And it's 15% off. And if you use the 10% coupon, you can get 25% off.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
So again, for those of you who rolled out of bed and said, I'm going to get in the health coaching business, get some education because it's scary and you could do some harm, because it is a wild, wild west out here on the internet right now. So definitely find a really great school like this and educate yourself so that you're going to get out there and give people the correct information and be really powerful in your passion. Thank you so much, Ava.
Thank you, Jana, for sharing your story with me. And I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.